Hello again. I'm back with another demo. Um, I know in the last video I talked a lot about the frame per second gains that foveated rendering would offer, but I also noticed that there was a lot of flickering pixels at the edge of my vision, so I wanted to talk a bit more about image quality. So right now I have my radius set fairly small from a VR standpoint, and even if I don't have lighting enabled, you can make out as I move around, you can make out a shimmering at the edges. And the reason why that shimmering is so apparent is because in a VR headset, it's really hard to hold your head perfectly still, and nobody should really be expected to. And with that kind of shimmering, the pixels are changing their colors a lot, and it's really easy to notice that. So let me switch back to normal. So let me increase the radius here to double, and then I'll reassemble the image again. And here it's not so noticeable. I barely see any problems at all. This is mostly perfectly acceptable. I can very slightly make out the edge of the circle, so it might be a good idea to maybe blur the edge of the circle a bit, maybe add a mid sample between full and half. It might help that part of the problem. But if I turn on lighting, now, if I look directly at that wall, it looks perfectly fine with a tiny bit of shimmer on the specular. But there's a point where it really starts to show off the how the specular highlights are bouncing around. So let me turn off lighting one more time and switch back to foveated stencil. So I'll double the radius again and make it even bigger. And turn on lighting again. Whoops. There we go. And then full foveated render. So now this time when I look off to the edge, it's perfectly acceptable. But of course there's a cost to that. The larger this radius is, the less savings that you get when you're doing some very expensive calculations. So I'm going to activate light shafts. And you can see my frame rate has just dropped to 45. The Quest 3 pretty much forces you to have the frame rate. The HP Reverb G2 can give you an in-between frame rate a little better, so I'm going to end the video with a demo on the HP Reverb G2. And this is only with 2500p. There's a visual bug if I switch to a high-res scale. Let me switch to 1.5 res scale, and it drops me to 23 or so. And then if I fully reassemble the scene, you get all this, I don't know if you can see this, but I get a lot of terrible horizontal and vertical line artifacting. Probably has something to do with how I'm calculating texture coordinates. Switch back to res scale 1. So I'm at 45 even with a full foveated render. And if I switch back to full, it will, switch back to no foveated, it drops me to around 34. So I do get some improvement, even having a very large radius. But let me switch over to the HP Reverb G2, and we'll see what that one does for me. Be right back. So here I am back with the HP Reverb G2 with basically the same scene. And when I activate foveated render, again, you can see all the shimmering. And this is at basically the same resolution as I had with the Quest 3. I have a 2500p volume here. So let me increase the radius. And it's very acceptable. And then I'll turn on lighting. Let's turn off light shafts for the time being. And there's a bit of shimmering off to the right. It's not terrible. It's acceptable. And when I turn on light shafts, I drop down to 59. when it would be 40. So I get around a 50% improvement by using foveated render. And if I go up to res scale 1.5, again, I get that artifacting. I still got to figure out why that's happening. But without the foveated render, I drop down to 20. And with the foveated, I go up to 34 or so. So let's increase the radius all the way to double. And once again, I'll turn off foveated, and I'm at 20 frames per second right now. And then when I activate foveated, I barely get any gains at all on the HP Reverb G2. I'm pretty much only go up from 20 up to 24. And even reassembling the scene costs me a little bit. So having a radius this large doesn't really give me all that many gains at all. So is it acceptable to only have this radius? Let me turn off light shafts again, so that's at least a bit tolerable. At res scale 1.5, well, I mean, I got the artifact line, so I can't really tell at res scale 1.5. But at res scale 2500, I think it's kind of acceptable. The shimmering that I'm getting at the edge, that image quality is what you really want to try to preserve when you're trying to take advantage of foveated rendering. But if I double the radius, it's very, very acceptable. But you don't get a lot of savings by having your radius be that large. Anyway, these are just things to consider when you're trying to use foveated rendering. There's a balancing to do when you're trying to use it. You do get some gains, but preserving image quality, you're probably only going to get around 30 to 50% improvement. But you get a lot of improvement if you keep the radius small, but you get a lot of bad artifacting at the edges of your scene. So these are just things to keep in mind. Thanks for watching. If I have another subject to talk about regarding foveated rendering, I'll make another video. Thanks and have a good day.